Today, I have a massive Pelican-style case. This is very similar to the Celebrite unit that I have to copy cell phone data. This is a complete standalone portable cell phone copying unit for forensics purposes. Unfortunately, this one doesn't actually break into cell phones. The much smaller handheld Celebrite one that I have can actually bypass cell phone protection and get into them as long as it's an older phone or if you have the newer version of it. So this thing's kind of pointless. All it does is copy from one old phone to another. So yeah, I'm not planning on keeping this thing. This one is a lot more advanced than the Celebrite one. It's a full-fledged computer as opposed to just a microcontroller unit. It also has all the connectors digitally marked so it can light up the particular wire that you need. This one can read memory cards, SIM cards. It's got a little storage pouch down here with more cables, and there's just tons of cables like USB cables and stuff. This one has an infrared reader and USB. There's also a DC output which you can plug in some cables into give a phone power. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It's a laptop that talks to these connectors, and probably costs like 10 grand. There's a small RJ45 connector here, and then that plugs into each one of these depending on what phone you need, and it will just extract it, and you can record it onto this and then write it back to something else or save it to memory cards, that sort of thing. Each one of these is individually assigned a code so that it identifies itself with a little light whenever you need to use the correct cable. And this one happens to be micro USB. I'm sure that'd be the most common. They all just plug into this rack of RJ45 connectors. All the RJ45 connections are made just through this additional RJ45 cable, which has a little broken clip. But that plugs in here, and then there's also a VGA out. It's essentially just a PC with all these things plugged into it. There's a custom board on the inside, which we'll take a look at. The whole design is metal and very high quality. They've obviously done all the custom work to make this thing. So I was looking through the connectors in the storage bin, and I realized that the reason why they're in the storage bin is because they actually have mini DIN connectors instead of the RJ45s. So I looked around, and it turns out this number 25, which is for use with Nokia phones, has a little mini DIN connector so you can adapt it whichever particular phone you're using. Nokia ones in particular often have very bizarre false batteries, and this one's just some pogo pins. So they often have weird connectors, so I can see why they'd have a weird adapter for that. And a couple of them are actually just straight USB cables, so these could presumably be used on anything. But I don't have, this one looks like it has internal electronics. So this is probably a serial converter inside. On the inside of this one, it's an Atmel microcontroller that is most likely just converting it to serial. On this side, there's just the tablet PC that's just kind of held into the frame with some brackets. They also have a ruler here, presumably for taking photos for forensic purposes, and a little cheap stylus, and that's about it. There's just a few controls for the tablet. On the inside, it's pretty sparse. It's really just the storage compartment, the laptop, which is bracketed to the top plate. There's a single large PCB, the standard readers, which are just USB readers, or they're just the standard off-the-shelf ones, and a very large battery at the bottom. So the battery works in conjunction with the internal laptop battery. As far as I can tell, it powers everything, but it's also powering all these external devices. You can see there's quite a bit of stuff on that PCB. The PCB itself connects with a USB connection, so in theory it could be used in a virtual machine or something. This laptop's just running XP. As you can see, once it's removed, it is just a little Fujitsu 2-in-1, a life book. So this thing can fold up, turn into a laptop, or flip over, tablet. It's actually pretty cool. This particular one actually has a lot of nice stuff on it. It's got a fingerprint reader and obviously the touch screen, and it's very small and it's very rigid. Like, this is a very well built unit. It's got has what I assume is an express card slot, although that doesn't really look like an express card slot. Maybe it's just a legacy card bus slot. And USB, SD, audio, VGA, it has a modem. So I couldn't get this thing to recharge, and I ended up taking the whole laptop apart and a whole bunch of other stuff, trying a whole bunch of different things. Turned out it was a combination of just like a bad adapter I had and other things. So anyway, I got it all charged up. My capture device isn't working properly, so I'm just gonna have to film this the old-fashioned way. And it's pretty slow, even though it's running off a CF card, which should speed it up over the 1.8-inch drive that was originally in it. But it doesn't really seem to make a difference, so it's probably mostly CPU bound. It being a single core CPU. All right, so it eventually makes it to the login screen. Just hit OK. There's no password on the account, at least on my particular unit. So it comes installed with QuickTime, iTunes, Windows Media Player, a couple other things, presumably for media playback once you've extracted some files, but I don't think this is really geared towards actually viewing stuff on the device, because it pretty much locks out Windows. Eventually it loads and you see it changed its orientation and now has the thing in tablet mode. Yeah, it's just brutally slow. Again, even with the hard drive is really slow too. I was worried that the drive might die, so I cloned it onto an actually, it's on an SD card, I think. I think I have an SD card to a CF card adapter inside there. Either way, it should be faster than this. All right, so it starts up with just a license agreement, which will be impossible to read while capturing like this. And it's complaining that it can't find the connector rack, which it is plugged in. So I think I just need to close the lid. There's a small switch on the top that you can press and it'll trigger it, thinking that the lid's closed. See if we can start it up again. All right, there we go. The main interface is pretty straightforward. You can read devices, view your previous extractions, upgrade the software, do some setup, turn on and off the power. There's a log. So you can pick which device it will read from: a straight SIM card. It'll read from flash memory. I haven't actually looked at this. Is this just straight memory chips? Oh, okay. So it just means memory cards. So yeah, smart media, compact flash, all those good things. Oh, and just a plain thumb drive. It can read from various GPS devices. I assume Garmin and TomTom, that sort of thing. This interface is very slow. Yeah, so it's just your standard Garmin stuff and TomTom. And under cell phone, you get a whole bunch of brands: Motorola, Apple. So if we go to, say, Apple, you can do list models. This one just supports a generic Apple iPhone, the 2G, 3G, and 4. But because this doesn't actually break any encryption or anything, you have to be able to install software onto it and interface with it. You have to unlock it, essentially. So one nice thing about this thing is when you select it and go to let's just go to view models this time, you can actually see pictures of the phones. Let's say I want this one. It'll show you what it can take. It'll say, okay, you cannot extract videos from this. You can extract this. You can extract that. My cat is trying to climb the radiator. Why are you going that way? There's this, yeah, there's a box right there, dude. Weird cats. Anyway, so it'll identify which things you can extract, such as web history, but it can't extract videos on this one. And then you just hit run extraction, but it's complaining that it can't find anything right now. Oh, it needs a place to store files anyway. Since it does no decryption or bypassing of lockouts, it doesn't actually end up being all that interesting, at least compared to the CellDEK one, which can bypass certain lockouts. I think that's pretty much it for the software. I do have a copy of this drive. I can always try running it in a VM if I need to check something later. Yeah, it's just an XP thing. I've gone through the files and I've actually run unerased software on it to see if there's any previous extractions or anything of interest on it, and there isn't. So it's pretty boring, despite its fancier user interface compared to the CellDEK one. It's really pretty boring. So let's just take a look at the hardware. So I'm basically just going to remove all the components and we'll take a look at them individually, since this Pelican knockoff case is gigantic. Once everything's removed, there's just all these brackets they use to hold in the gigantic battery, which we'll take a look at. These things just lock in here with nuts, and yeah, there's a metal frame that runs through the entirety of the container, and that's what probably makes this thing so ridiculously heavy. But they have all these cutouts for running USB cables and stuff. See, they run the VGA cable over here and stuff. So yeah, it's all just purpose built for this particular unit. At the top here, there's just the connection, which interfaces with all the adapters. This thing just runs down to the main PCB, which we'll take a look at. It looks as though the top rack is held in with all these screws, which I'm not sure if these are actually water resistant. And I'm not sure if that the DC barrel jack is actually water resistant. I mean, it does have a little piece of rubber over it, but I find it hard to believe that this thing's particularly watertight after all this modding done to it. Yeah, they got a little O-rings on them, so this is probably at least reasonably weather resistant. I really like the design they use for the connector farm as it's labeled on the main PCB. The input is right here for the RJ45, and then it just has a few traces running off to every single one of these. So presumably they're scanning for some kind of serial ID, most likely the number that's written on them, such as 24. So what they've done is this is all sheet metal, and they've bent out the nice little compartments, and looks like they've welded these on or glued them in some way. And they have also put in these nice eyelets so that they can screw right into them. Very nice. And then it's just one giant PCB that handles both sides. And there's nothing on it. It's really just a couple traces that run to everything. And it's just all RJ45 connectors. So this was probably actually fairly pricey to make due to the size of the board. And I bet this fits right in here. Yep. So yeah, they're cutting it out of the same PCB. I'm sure there's more things that they make that fit into this for the paneling. So this is the smart card reader, aka the SIM card reader. And then you got a standard USB 2, just memory card reader, which reads pretty much everything. Reads smart media, and I guess that's, I wonder what this one would be. Oh, probably, no, that's memory stick. Oh, this is probably XD cards, and then SD and CF. So your standard array of stuff. It's custom made, obviously, for these particular parts. Kind of this weird mix of off-the-shelf parts, but then very costly additions to them because, well, I mean, you don't want to have to invent your own media reader, but yeah, I'm sure you can track down something that's a bit nicer than this thing. I mean, look at it. It's just like these things all fall apart. I love how all of these have the same piece of plastic that does this. And yeah, so I mean, like, it's weird. Here's the ginormous battery, which seems to be 8 individual components. So let me see if I can just take this off. I don't know how well attached all this is. Non-spillable thin line cell, 2 volts. I think these are lead acid batteries. Yep, recycle lead. So they're all just soldered together in series to get your 16 volts. And they have just looks, I guess probably just for overload or a polyfuse of some type. Huh, interesting. This is actually the 3rd attempt at shooting this one little shot. Anyway, the laptop itself is quite good. It's a 2-in-1. It's got a little fingerprint reader. You've got a whole bunch of ports. I wish I had a serial port. That would be nice, but it does have a card bus port here, slot here, so you could just grab a serial adapter there if you wanted to use this as a terminal or anything. It's got 1 stick of memory in it. It's proprietary. Screw you, Fujitsu. And yeah, it's half a gig. The hard drive is a standard 1.8-inch hard drive. This is what came with it, a 30 gig Toshiba. I was using a convoluted, this is the ribbon cable that goes to it. This converts it to a CF card. And then I was converting the CF card into an SD card, which I had just raw copied the image onto after copying this one. It worked fine. It was just slow. I mean, so was the hard drive. So I could actually see myself using this as like a portable terminal. The keyboard on it isn't terrible. It's a little bent because I disassembled it and didn't put it all the way back in. But the keyboard's actually usable. It's very cramped, but it's a lot better than that stupid Dell Mini I had in an old video. That thing was useless. Looking at the inside of one of these adapters, they look fairly straightforward. So they just have the RJ45 connector coming in on one side, and it looks like this just comes right out. Yeah, there's just a couple resistors, LED, and a little IC here, which is probably like a little PIC microcontroller. Yep, that is a teeny tiny Atmel AT Tiny. And there's a little botch capacitor on there for good luck. I wonder if they had to do that to all of these. And yeah, so this is simply just reading an ID that's being sent over like a serial bus, and just to all of them. And whenever it hits, oh look, I'm number 23, it lights up the LED, and that's all it's doing. Last but not least, we have the main PCB, which was made in 2007 by Logicube. The connections to the board are mostly USB, but they have like oddball connections like the RJ45 to the connector farm, which is funny because the board itself calls it a cell farm. And this goes to the main bed. That's where you're interfacing with the device itself. This connector is not hooked up. It's probably programming header. There's a little thing that says short to program to the AVR, so that's probably a programming header of some type. There's an alternative connector to the device bed. This isn't hooked up either, so they probably have a different model that uses this. Up here we've got the SIM card reader and the they call it multi-card. It's the memory stick, the flash memory reader. So they have two USB connections here. They all go to this SMSC USB 2 hub, which is providing all these extra ports. So they've got a couple more ports here, one for the IRDA, which if you're not familiar, IRDA is an infrared-based serial communications protocol that was fairly popular in like mid to late 90s and into very early 2000s, and that's about it. I believe it was on the very first iMac. It was not really used for anything, and obviously we have Bluetooth, so no need for that anymore. This is just held around for legacy phones that need that interface. You can see all the pairs for the data running off to everything. So there's a little protection circuit here for the for these. And there's a small AVR, I think that's AVR 8, and then you've got FTDI USB to serial bridge. There's another programming port here. Since this says AVR programming, I'm guessing this is for something else. Must be an alternate board of some type. Looks like there's a regulator here, and I know this is switchable, so there's probably a shutdown signal on that the microcontroller can turn on and off the unit. 5-volt output for the fan, which kind of broke off the connector when I ripped it apart. There's a few bodges here. Hey Jonesy. What's up, buddy? You exploring? Farewell. This is on for legacy mode, and that seems to be, I guess you have to switch all of these on. I'm not sure what this is for, unless they have an older model that they're using this newer PCB on. Bunch of power supply stuff. There's lots of bodges around. It's completely expected on a low volume product like this. More power supply stuff, again, more bodges. The input from the charger, which is just a DC barrel jack, as is the battery input. And then there's a big resistor here. And this is a huge 105 degree rated 47,000 mic 25 volt super cap. Probably allows it to at least partially finish an extraction, or at least give you enough time to cancel the extraction should there be a power outage or the battery suddenly disconnects. I'm not really sure why they have this, seeing as there's that huge battery inside the case, unless they have issues with it just dropping out or something. I'm not sure. It seems weird that they need a super cap when they have that gigantic battery in there and the battery inside the laptop. So there's a laptop battery, and there's a connector labeled COM1. I think that's probably just some kind of like serial connection. I don't think that's a no, it's not a USB connection, so I don't know what that is. One of these connects to the laptop. I can't remember if the other one was connected, but it would just be another pass-through device. So yeah, pretty interesting board. They have the nice cutouts for these wire ties, and it's made in the USA. Overall, it's a pretty interesting product. There's lots of cool stuff in it, and I like seeing any kind of forensic stuff, since it's usually you know, money is no object type thing, but it's interesting when you have a device like this, which is kind of a combination of off-the-shelf parts and your really fancy custom PCBs and metalwork and stuff. So, what's up, buddy? What? What do you think's up here? Nothing's gonna attack you. Come here. Want me to come to you? Want me to come to you?